Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's 7:42 a.m. on July 29th, 2020. I have a very important matter to broach with you today. It is, by now, a matter of fact that there have been a variety of cybernetic enhancements that have occurred domestically in the United States and elsewhere around the planet. I believe and understand these were parts of systematologies that existed for a substantial amount of time prior to the collapse of the Soviet Union, and that different social and cultural norms accepted this under certain circumstances as being a legitimate part of their society building. But the United States has gone through a process where the practices involved with creating the material conditions for these cybernetic enhancements to actualize benefits to our lives have been intentionally obscured. And one of the primary matters in which they did this was under the illusion of healthcare. Now, anybody that's well versed in the history of health insurance and medical insurance in the United States and or other things connected to the medical sector, including the history of research and development, both for various kinds of techniques that are used in surgery, as well as medications, and especially people that are aware of the history of so-called mental health care, going all the way back to the days of the sanitariums and lobotomies, will support an assessment of an understanding that healthcare often had ulterior motives as opposed to just a quality of life for people involved. Among those were projects that were expressly eugenicist and need to be addressed in conjunction with anything that wants to talk about racial justice, especially racial justice concerning access to health care. But we are at a different stage right now, insofar as I am attempting to broach this topic with you. And the first thing to know is that it is completely possible for us, both biophysiologically, technologically, and even economically, to have control over and say over what happens to the energy we produce biophysiologically, whether it be intellectual capital that we are creating in our leisure time, whether it be intangible property that we create and cultivate, both while we are engaged in so called work or professional settings, or when we are in non professional settings. All of these things also are energy. See, one of the biggest farces of the energy paradigm is the refusal to address human labor from a standpoint of energy consumption and production when discussing matters related to energy globally, including the economics involved with energy. And attendant with that is also a inability to make an appropriate connection between human activities around consumption and production of energy and the impact it has on our natural environment. So we've had several decades of different kinds of energy paradigms being allowed to have priority, even if it would seem and it is, understood that the impacts that their productive processes have on the natural environment impact our bodies and make us sick and or contribute to a deterioration of certain social standards that would be considered a part of our national character or would be considered part of the ethos that we would like to function with. And in the meantime, our bodies have become more accessible for commercialization, including through commercialization of our sexual activities. This is not the kind of thing that we should shy away from. It is also not the kind of thing to abstract or derivate. And I contend it is not the kind of thing to try to couch in some sort of gamesmanship that tries to exotify its potential misabuse for criminal activities or exotify previously maligned stereotypes or fetishes of people based on national origin or their class or other things about them that could be considered within the realm of the exotic. This is the kind of thing we can, in fact, harness for ourselves, that we can use and engage with technology that's already currently available in order to create our own biocurrency and to engage with people in meaningful and cognizant ways about how we wish to trade or exchange it. If you're the kind of person that wants to exchange your sexual bioenergy as a form of currency in order to get your needs met, then we should, and we do, have the means available to make this occur. If you are somebody that has other forms of currency you are capable of making or you produce with your biology and do not want your sexual activity to be engaged in any sort of commercial activity, we also have the technology to make that possible. So there's no reason for us to pretend that it's about something else. If you decide that you want to comport yourself in a way where you brand or market your energetic potentials in manners that are distasteful or sensationalist of some form of deceit or attempt at demeaning another person, then you will necessarily have to be held to the standards which you set for yourself when you represent yourself in that manner. But we are all capable of being professionals in addressing this forthrightly. I personally, under what I understood to be an eminent need, developed a nascent, what I called biosecurity paradigm, which was based on my past work in the Department of Public Health during a time when, globally, the United States was matching or was catching up with what had already happened, specifically in Europe and other parts of the world, where diagnostic codes related to medical treatment were being updated and expanded to be more specific. And in that research and with other research I had done as somebody that worked in compliance for the public health department, I understood that it was possible, insofar as electromagnetic frequencies are also connected to our attempts to acquire some sort of medical treatment, that we can actually create a customizable biosecurity systematology that actually allows for our energetic centers to recirculate our own energy or be connected into matrices of energy with other people so that we can engage in healing, so that we can engage in nourishment, and so that we can transfer or we can exchange our bioenergy with other people. We should be able to do this on our own terms. This is not the kind of thing that any national actor or any sort of corporate entity should be allowed to deceptively engage and acquire through alleged medical treatment after they've already visited environmental damage that has attempted to compel us into receiving some sort of medical treatment, so that then they can create social engineering aimed at getting us to participate in on-site reconfiguration of the centrally planned economy they've already established. Regardless of whether you consider yourself to be of one particular political tradition or not, democratic participation involves information, and any sort of social or political accountability also has to involve disclosure. There is no reason to represent that these possibilities for cybernetic enhancement or for these possibilities for integrating robotics or other kinds of mechanical processes and or being able to take our naturally occurring bioelectricity and integrate it into man-made or synthetic electrical production resources so that we can actively engage with the energy paradigm in our environment. We should also be in a position where we can negotiate our own rates. And we should also be able to, at any point, say no. Now, in this country, the United States, and other parts of the world, including through treaty relationships, memorandums of understanding, When we're talking about vital national security issues, including things that might have to do with an environmental situation or something that might have to do with important national security facilities, which also includes national defense, which also could potentially include the weapons arsenals in the vicinities where we are that would necessarily need electricity in order to be secured and to be put into a position so they could not be infiltrated, then the discussions around access to energy or specific kinds of energy on an as needed basis, or perhaps in an emergency situation, including a potential need for mobilization for national defense purposes, is the kind of thing we already have in place, structures with which to deal. There were years where things, for instance, like the neighborhood emergency response teams, were a very prominent part of various municipal areas. People were trained in the neighborhood to know what their neighborhood needed, and in case of an emergency, to be called up in order to be able to provide a vital role. These are the kinds of things that we already have. And if we've allowed them to be de-emphasized, as there has been a effort to try to falsely centralize or to falsely expropriate our local resources into absorption into a nexus of some sort of federal acquisition, then this is something that we have a right to seek redress for, and we also have a right to assert our independence in these regards. Those are the kinds of things that were absolutely vital and necessary for us to be able to be given the material preconditions to contribute education, public awareness, so that we had what we needed in order to be able to engage and be engaged in a meaningful manner in any sort of energy transition. So now is the time to stop talking about these things in doublespeak, or to stop trying to abstract it into some metaphorical disengagement or disassociation for somebody else to centrally plan. Now is the time for us to be direct and acknowledge we have these capabilities. The means are at hand. For instance, as I've said, I personally came up with a nascent paradigm. I've done some adjustments. In the meantime, there was illegal activity that was involved with the illegal expropriation of my early ideas and my early systematology, but that has not deterred me. While deterrence is very important for certain matters, using extortion to try to compel acquiescence to illicit activities is not.